happened so fast. I still can't believe it was only a year ago. My name is Mark, and I was once what you would call an untouchable, and as such was treated as one. I used to live in New Delhi, our once proud capital. That was until the Warsel arrived. I am still haunted by that day every night, and for the sake of record keeping, I will try to recount that horrific experience. It was a normal day for me. I was sweeping the streets so that my superiors didn't have to worry about it. As an untouchable, we were even lower than the Shadras in our society and didn't even have a place on the caste system. I hated the damn caste system and still do with a passion that I cannot even describe with words. Yet I dealt with it, for I had no choice. I was continuing my route when suddenly people were running in random directions. I tried to stop a young lady and ask her what was going on, but she just kept on running. I began to walk in the direction they came running from. Something most would call a very stupid idea, but I did it anyway. Eventually, I came to a store and people were huddled on the ground, shivering, crying, and yelling. They were staring at the TVs on display at the store, and I asked them what the hell was going on. Only one person responded by pointing at the TV, and what I saw to this day, I will never forget. The TV had a news network being broadcast in the USA. On the screen was a huge, menacing machine. It must have stood 120 feet tall and walked with 4 fat legs. There were unknown things flying around it, firing at buildings as the giant machine crushed buildings below, while unleashing a large blast of some kind of purple energy. A line of text below the carnage on the screen read, "Chaos as Washington is set ablaze by unknown walker." The walkers continued to strike at what appeared to be a school, and people were running for cover, but could find none. And even if they did, they were shot by the floating objects in the sky. I noticed one person running after a girl, but there was just so much smoke he lost her, and ran into a building for cover. For once in my entire life, I forgot all about the caste system our people oppressed one another with, and joined those on the ground watching the screen, and it became clear that they had forgotten about it too. After watching the carnage for what felt like hours, finally I grew tired of feeling like a helpless child, and I stood up. Are we going to just sit here like scared children, or are we going to prepare ourselves? A woman stood up from within the crowd and said, "And what would you suggest we do?" I responded, "We need to stockpile as many weapons as we can and get all the Kashitra ready." To this, a man now stood up and said, "You bark orders to us like a government official. What is your caste, sir?" To this, I remained silent for a moment and finally said, "That's not important right now and doesn't matter." To this, he replied, "Indeed it does, because I recognize you, boy. You're untouchable. Casteless vermin, get out of here." Before I could reply, many people began to yell at one another, and during this arguing, I slipped away past the crowd. I began to run now toward a road and found many cars on the highway, clearly fleeing the country. I walked past them, horns honking, when suddenly I heard a horrible noise. I will never forget that sound. It was like the conjoining of a massive angry creature and that of a machine cutting something. From the ground behind me, A huge, what the Americans called anyway, walker stood now behind me, only about 30 feet away. I stood paralyzed in fear and motionless as it began to move forward. Slowly its footsteps, shaking the ground with each step, when it suddenly began to fire into the crowd of cars. I ran faster than I ever had before in my entire life, with that monster right behind me. It was just happening here now, too, just like in the United States. As I had that thought, the same floating discs had arrived as well to support the walker. They began to suck up people and kill anyone who ran for too long. All that was in my head at this point was running. Running and running. I had heard so many screams at this point, and I was now convinced the gods were angry with us. I had made it to the end of the road, and now was face of a bridge. At this point, thousands were running away, their cars abandoned as the walker pursued us at great speed. Suddenly I heard the roaring of jets, and I quickly turned behind me to see planes engaging the walkers. I caught a glimpse of the flag on the plane, and the moment I noticed the Union Jack, I knew the British had come to help us. The walker was now distracted by the Air Force, and I was about to make it to the end of the bridge when I noticed the blockade. It was manned by soldiers, but they weren't any I recognized. They wore armor far beyond military grade and carried some kind of glowing swords. I didn't have time to ask, and I ran past them. They simply let me pass. I ran into a building and huddled in the corner, completely unaware of anything happening around me. As I sat there, curled in a ball, an arm grasped my shoulder, and scared, I almost jumped at the strength in which it did so. A voice, however, eased my fear. "Citizen, are you okay?" I rose now to see a man clad in the same armor as before. However, his shined gold and had streaks of glowing green lines all over it. "I'm fine, thank you. Who are you?" He let go of my shoulder and now stared at me right in the eyes and said, "My name is Harbinger Gadget, and I'm here to help you all. There isn't time to explain. Please come with me at once." I did as the Harbinger commanded, and followed him outside into a town square where many others stood silent and scared. There was a podium on an elevated platform guarded by two of these unknown militants. Gadget tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Wait here." And I did as he commanded. He began to walk to the podium, and the soldier saluted as he did so. He cleared his throat and said, "Fellow brothers and sisters, my name is Gadget, the Harbinger of the Order of Brahma. We were found in secret thousands of years ago for when the time came that the destroyers were to come to the land." To this, everyone stared in awe as he pulled out his blade, a glowing energy blade that glowed green, and he gripped it with his two hands. "I call upon each of you now to serve Brahma and repel the invaders. Are you with me?" The audience roared with enthusiasm. "Then follow my guards, and you will learn the ways of our order and the ways of our true world." They all did so, and I could hear the jets fighting the walkers, and those of the order began to mount on the turrets placed on towers in the encampment. They fired shots at the walker, and it actually appeared to be taking damage. I stood in awe, as with the combined powers of this powerful group's turrets and the British Air Force, the walker fell, crashing into the ocean below the bridge with a mighty splash. The aircraft now began to engage the invaders' air force, and the Order's turrets supported them. Eventually, I joined those who went inside and descended a flight of steps into the halls of the Order of Brahma. Inside, we were told anything that we experienced in there was to be kept secret. So I must ask your forgiveness as I say, I cannot tell you what transpired inside those halls. As time went on and nations began to unify, we stood independent, as what we now called ourselves, Neo-India. Our country now stands divided by the invaders. Traitors of the Order joined the invaders as overseers to the slaves they now owned in their own foolish caste system, far worse than ours. Oh yes, our system still stands, however, it's not important to us right now. Over the years, many things have changed. I once stood casteless, and now I stand Harbinger. My name is Harbinger Mark, and I now stand leader of the Order of Brahma and leader of Neo-India. I write this as a record, for we are on the eve of a great battle. Today, we take back my home of New Delhi, or we die trying. For honor and death, for Brahma and for Neo-India, we march.